Hi, I'm Lauren, a mom, former teacher, turned children's book author, and your host who joins special guests each episode as we share our top kid-lit picks for sparking hard conversations the easy way. Yep, that means everything from tackling bullying and out-of-control anger to celebrating diversity, inclusion, and leading with kindness, plus so much more. My whole mission of my own children's book series, Blooming Rose, is to provide social and emotional support tools for in and out of the classroom, and this podcast is my way to expand that mission even further. So stay tuned as we dive into this week's topic on the Blooming Books podcast. Hi guys, it's Lauren, and I'm here with our special guest today, the co-founder and lead therapist at the WELL Counseling Center in Katy. She is a licensed clinical social worker with a background in school-based social work that includes years of practicing in the school setting and gives her that unique perspective when working with adolescents and families. So please welcome Miss Carly Kirk.
Hello, I'm so glad to be here today.
And thank you so much. She has invited me here to their beautiful space here in Katy, Texas. We're at the WELL Counseling Center in historic Katy, right? Isn't it the historic downtown Katy is what
Katy.
You would call it? It's such a great location, and their space is just so nice and calming, and there's natural light, and there's soothing music, and it's just, I could stay here all day. So she's going to have to kick me out later. But thank you so much for being on our podcast. We'll share how to connect with you in this amazing center at the end of the episode. But first, let's get to know a little bit more about you. So can you tell me a little bit about how you got into counseling? We mentioned working in schools a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I went to school for social work, and I knew eventually I wanted that to look like working with children and families in some capacity. And so during graduate school, I interned with an elementary school in Spring Branch ISD.
Okay.
And loved that experience, loved having just access to kiddos who are struggling and maybe having a hard time in the classroom, getting to have some one-on-one time just working through what was going on for them. And so that was my first internship, and then I interned at a counseling center my second year. And that was really cool because I was able to work with the whole family. And so I loved that piece. In the classroom or at school, you don't get as much direct access to parents. And so I know that there's so much that has to be happening at home while we're also working on stuff with the kiddo. And so that was really eye-opening for me. After I graduated, I went straight back into the school setting because I did love that direct access to students and getting to focus on mental health rather than, academic school counseling piece.
Yes.
Because school counselors do so much, and there's also a lot of hurting kids who need some help or who are struggling. And so to be able to partner with the school counselors, LSSPs, whoever that was, but to get to focus on the mental health piece was really, really cool. And so I did that for a couple years in Spring Branch, working for a nonprofit, Communities in Schools. And so that was a really cool experience and really gave me just a variety of situations and struggles and issues that students were dealing with and families were dealing with. And so I know that was just a huge piece of my own experience, then transitioning into private practice. And so my mom and I actually went into practice together and opened the WELL.
Cool.
Yes. And so she has been a marriage and family therapist in Katy for almost 30 years now.
Wow.
And so it started out just the two of us. It was like end COVID time, and so we were looking for an office space, found this precious old house that we loved. Yes. And we really wanted a space that was inviting and warm and didn't feel stuffy or medical. And so we've just loved getting to grow the practice here, and our heart is for whole families. And so we have a team of therapists, and we get to work with kiddos, teenagers, couples, just the whole family.
Yeah. I feel like we can have a whole podcast series, a whole separate podcast about the mental health issues in our schools and getting to piece it all together and having professionals like you guys be in. Like when I worked in elementary, I worked in 2 different districts on the east side of Houston.
Okay.
But we really didn't have any other support besides the school counselor.
Yeah.
And they were running around with discipline issues, like being reactive instead of being proactive. And so that is really my whole mission behind the series, the podcast, everything. is how can we be more proactive in schools, at home, because it is such a circle that works together synergistically between home life, school life, and don't even begin to think about academics before we have all of these babies mentally in a good place to grow from. But yeah, so I could pick your brain on that, but we'll keep it to this podcast topic. So before we get in, let's get into some silly and random rapid-fire questions. So I like to lighten the mood, get to know our guests just a little bit more, and then kind of dive into our topic. So number 1, what is your favorite destination you've traveled to?
Favorite destination? So when I finished grad school, my husband and I took a trip, 2.5-week backpacking trip in Europe.
Gosh. Wow.
And so that was super fun, very just like wild. We went place to place because in our minds we were like, who knows when we're going to get back here. Once you're over there, taking a train or going to other countries and different things can be pretty easy. So we just explored all over. And I would say my favorite place that we went was Italy. I loved, we went to Florence for a little bit and then the Amalfi Coast. And it was just beautiful and slow and restful, and we loved it.
Yeah, when you kind of step out of those big cities, especially in Europe and a lot of the tourist destinations, and you get to go. I've never been to Italy. My mom goes almost once a year.
Oh, wow.
And then I've been to France and been to Spain. So, of course, I love that. And I love going off the beaten path and really just eating your way through Europe would be good. So fun. You can't not have fun with that. Okay, so number 2, if you were to write a book, what genre or topic would it be?
This is an easy one. It would definitely be mental health, self-help related in some way. My friends always joke with me because I don't read the fun books. I probably should, but I just love soaking up and learning and just growing through what I'm reading. And so I think it would be maybe something helping parents kind of navigate with kiddos on certain topics or certain phases of development, or doing like a guided journal for teenagers. Something along those lines of things that I'm doing daily with clients, but to get to kind of do it on a broader scale.
That is a really good idea. Of course, I'm going to push you to publish a book.
Yes.
But
I know,
that is a good idea to do like the journey. Like here is what we, like topics you can cover and how you can talk about it like with each different level. Because, you know, I have a 3rd grader and a 5-year-old, a preschooler, and how they, you know, conquer challenges is 2 different ways. Yes. And then I'm scared to think of teenagers. So, you know, we always need more. It's good. We need more help with that. She just turned 9 last week, and I swear she turned 19. Like, she redid her room. She wants clothes and gift cards, and like, I'm like, okay, we're just getting ready to the princess stuff. So we're going full steam ahead, I guess. Okay, number 3, we are, of course, right across from one of my favorite coffee shops in town, Humble Grounds. They have their OG location in Fulshire, which I go to all the time. They just opened this one in downtown Katy. That's right across the street from you guys, which is probably, like, for my budget-wise, I'd be like, I don't know if I would need to live across the street because that would be bad. But they have this amazing space called the Gathering Grounds. So when you're going to Humble Grounds, what is going to be your coffee order?
Okay, so my go-to, just like daily start my day coffee would be an Americano hot with a slash of heavy cream.
Yeah.
But if it's later in the day, maybe I want to go get another cup, which I do, which is so dangerous having it right there.
I didn't even think about twice a day.
I know, it's so bad. I have loved, they have like a house-made vanilla syrup. And so mixing that with their spice brown sugar to make a yummy latte, especially when it's cold, getting a hot one, it's all cozy, or I've had it iced. It's so good.
I almost feel like in the mornings I do hot coffee, but in the afternoons I have to do iced coffee.
Yeah.
Even if it's like 30 degrees outside. But
I feel that.
Yeah, that would be bad. I love mochas. Mochas are usually my go-to. Yeah. Iced mochas or even hot mochas. But I love all the different latte. Give me all the flavors. I'm good with that.
So good.
Okay, so now we're going to switch gears and dive into this week's topic. So I think self-regulation is one of the most important topics. Obviously, you know, regulating your array of emotions is where all the SEL, which is social emotional learning, where all of that kind of stems from, because it's really the basis of gaining that emotional stability. So can you give us your take on what self-regulation means to you and how you apply it with your patients?
Yeah, so I'm so excited about this topic because
this
is something that we focus on all the time, whether I'm working with a kiddo, a teenager, adults, like we all need to work on our self-regulation.
We really do.
So it is basically specifically for children. It's the child's developing ability to recognize, name, and manage their emotions. And so, yeah, like I said, this is a huge piece of my daily practice with clients, because if we don't start with first being able to self-regulate, we're going to struggle to move into the deeper interventions and deeper healing and working through whatever we're working through in their therapy sessions. It's so exciting for me to get to be a part of helping to guide parents as they're working with their kiddos on self-regulating, or when I'm working with a teenager and they have kind of that light bulb moment of, wow, if I can recognize the way I'm feeling and manage it, I can move forward and maybe not have that like reactionary behavior that I had, or lash out, or whatever that may be. And so, yeah, it's a huge part of the work that I get to do, which I love.
One of the things I've noticed in myself, because of course all of us parents are a work in progress as well, and I think I'm a little bit older than you, but like back in my day, I didn't even know what this term self-regulation was. But once you can identify it and say, okay, why am I in a bad mood? Why am I having a bad day? And it's like, oh, because I stubbed my toe 30 minutes ago, and then my kid spilled something, and it's like, all those things, once you start identifying, it seems really trivial, because then you can just let it go. You're like, okay, let me take a breath, let me let it go, and like not ruin the rest of your day. But if you can't stop and recognize when you're feeling that funk in the moment, then it can just kind of spiral out of control. And of course, it's like that for us adults, and times 10 with our kids, because they're emotionally and developmentally just learning these kinds of things.
Yeah, we talk a lot, especially with maybe a little bit older ones, but we talk about this snowball effect, kind of like what you said. Like one little thing happens, then it becomes the next thing, and we get through the day, and it's become this huge, awful day. When really, if we could have paused and just taken it for what it was, taken a breath, and moved forward, it didn't have to end that way.
Yeah, and I mean, even in marriage and stuff too, you think, okay, why am I annoyed with my husband right now? It's because he didn't get up and take the trash out. And it's like, okay, well, then you're able to give them patience and grace, and you look at the bigger picture and like, okay, well, is it really the end of the world? No, kind of thing, and help move on. In that, in turn, of course, in families, helps with the kids modeling in that and seeing that. Self-regulation comes in handy the most. Of course, we think about it when dealing with the frustrating or the upsetting feelings. So what are your top 3 tips for self-regulation for anger in particular?
Yeah. So like we already mentioned, learning to notice when we're becoming heightened is huge. So in my intake sessions with kiddos, teenagers, whoever, we first start talking about what we're feeling, and then what we feel in our body that's tied to that emotion. So maybe your tummy is starting to flip a little bit, and being able to connect that to feeling nervous or anxious. Or maybe your face starts to get red and your ears are getting hot, and that's that anger coming up. So being able to catch yourself as you're starting to feel heightened is huge, because then that's going to allow us to stop and breathe and be in the moment so that we can let it go. And then we know that anger is a secondary emotion. And so specifically with anger, being able to name the underlying emotions is huge. So rather than just, I'm so angry, being able to get down on our kiddos' level and ask, hey, I know you're feeling angry. What else might you be feeling? What kind of led up to this? And maybe from that, they'll start to explain, after we've kind of given them the terminology for it, but they can start to explain, oh, I feel embarrassed. I feel disappointed. I feel forgotten or left out. So being able to identify that is so huge in helping us know what is even triggering us. Yeah.
So I feel like identifying, and kind of as a parent or a teacher perspective, the validating.
Yes.
So you say, okay, what is it you're feeling? You say, oh, yeah, I get that. Or I felt like that before. Or I totally understand that you want to keep watching your tablet right now.
Yes.
But, we've got to make our change and, go get ready for bed, or, whatever else it is. So they're like, okay, mom gets it, and they don't feel so alone. But I want to add that a lot of techniques are based off of observations and modeling healthy responses for our kiddos, which is what we've kind of touched on, and even as parents, because we're not perfect, and I have to admit all the time to unhealthy responses or things that I've done out of frustration and anger that I later feel bad about, and that it's okay to go and apologize and recognize that and apologize that in your kids even. Do you have those types of conversations with parents in your practice, as well as how they can really take a look at their behavior and how it's reflecting on their kids.
Yes, I'm so glad that you bring this up.
And in the classroom, it's hard to do,
Yeah.
control with kids, but, at home, yes.
Yes.
Right?
I mean, that's such a huge piece of why self-regulation is so important across the board, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you even mentioned with marriage earlier, but as parents, like when we start to sense ourselves feeling heightened, to be able to pause and kind of reflect on that, like we are modeling to our kiddos all the time. They're not just learning from us in those intentional teaching moments. Honestly, most of those, you feel like, did they get anything out of this,
Probably
right? It's in that imitating and watching
Mm-hmm.
the way that we're showing up. And so to be able to, maybe get a little bit frustrated or handle something in a way we wouldn't have wanted to handle it. And then to go back and to sit down and say, hey, Mommy got frustrated earlier. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was starting to feel a little overwhelmed because of this and that and whatever. I am so sorry that I reacted from my frustration.
Yeah.
Mommy doesn't want to do that. So being able to kind of walk it through. I actually think about my now 3.5-year-old, but this is something we've done since the beginning, and he's our first, and so it felt kind of like an experiment of like apologizing to him when he's 1.5 or 2. Like, is this working? But I can distinctly remember we had modeled this a couple times, and we were in the car at home. He had done something that he honestly needed to apologize before, but I wasn't expecting that out of him. But we're in the car, and it had been kind of quiet, and all of a sudden he said, hey, Mommy and Daddy, I'm sorry. And we were both like, oh my goodness, it's working.
Yes.
Like he sees us and hears it. And so we were able to kind of use that moment to ask like how he had been feeling that led to the behavior, or also a moment for us to say, buddy, we forgive you and we love you no matter what. There is nothing you can
verbalize
do.
that, he could have held on to that, and you don't even realize it.
Right. And we don't want it to be a shame thing for us. We want to normalize it so that it's not a shame thing for him either, right? Yeah.
I think that's so amazing. And I mean, you touched on him being 1.5, I think.
Yeah.
And even if they're not always soaking up what you're talking about, I think they're like, oh, well, when do I start? When do you have to just start?
Yes.
And whether it's practice for you, literally, on how you want to go about it, whether they're kind of half paying attention, half not, to when they do get older. Because believe me, once they get older, and I mean, I think it's for mine, probably around 2-3 years old, they've got those big emotions coming out, and you can just go ahead and start talking about all that and identifying that stuff right away. And I love that they can come, because usually they are so sorry because they can't control their outbursts. They can't control their frustrations for so long, I mean, adults even have trouble controlling it. And so then after the fact, they do feel bad. So you don't want them internalizing and holding on to that feeling of like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I'm such a bad kid, or, anything like that. Because, of course, that's not true. Of course, that's everybody. I always tell my kids, it's okay to get mad. It's okay to get upset. It's okay to want to, feel jealous or whatever. But here's how we're going to react to it. It's not okay to hit, kick, and bite when you're mad, but it's okay to go scream. I said, we live on a farm. I said, go outside and scream at the top of your lungs.
That's so good.
Go upstairs and punch on a pillow. Don't punch on your brother, but go punch on a pillow. So you're giving those parameters from any age, really. As long as they can move and talk and listen and kick, hit, and bite and all that.
Yeah,
that's you can talk about it, right?
To also give them the other option, right? I think sometimes, and it's still great for us to validate and then say, hey, we can get upset, but we can't do this.
Right.
But then to further that and give them the option of, hey, instead of that, let's try these things. Like having those practical tools. I wish I had that when I was that little.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think we even talked about this kind of stuff when I was young. I mean, obviously my parents were modeling things healthy, and I guess that's just how you learn so many things as a kid, is just learn and watch around you. But I feel like we're really moving into a time where we're talking about it a lot more in the classrooms and at home, which is amazing. Okay, so let's chat about our book picks, because books, in my unbiased opinion, children's books in particular, are a really magical way to relate with kids to a concrete character that they can see and feel and react in situations that might be similar to what they're experiencing. That's the basis of this podcast, right? Is knowing they're not alone and feeling a certain type of way. So valuable, in my opinion. So can you tell us about your book pick on self-regulation?
Yes. So I went back and forth because there are so many good ones.
There are a lot of good ones.
But I decided to pick one. It's called Breathe Like a Bear by Willey.
Okay.
I love this one because it has mindful moments for kids to have those practical tools that we talked about. And so it talks about different breathing techniques or mindfulness or focus, but it gives fun little stories and scripts to it. And I think it's an awesome tool for parents to have or teachers to have to use in the classroom or at home. And so we have a couple of these that I regularly do with my little ones, especially my son, who's old enough to kind of understand it. But we do like candle breathing where we're holding our breath, you inhale and then you exhale slowly, but you don't fully blow out the imaginary candle. I'm holding up my finger while we do it. And then you get one final big blow that blows out the candle.
Right.
And really this is just a way for us to help kind of pause and check our breath and kind of shift out of maybe the anger or outburst or frustration and into just being present in the moment, and things are okay.
Yeah.
And now we're equipped to be able to actually have a conversation over what just happened versus going from 100 trying to get them down to 0.
Yeah, because those moments are not when you're going to get to them.
No, absolutely not. So I love this book as a great resource. And there's techniques and tools in here that I use myself too. So it's great for kids. It's got fun images and a little bit of storyline here and there, but really just practical tools.
Yeah, breathing is such a easy and simple but like effective tool for that reset.
Yes.
It reminds me of like when we have lots of dogs, and they get upset with each other and their heckles raise, right?
Yeah.
Like the hair along their back. They get all, that's raised, and they get all attentive, and like they're going to, boot up on somebody. But then once they realize the threat passes, then they kind of shake it off, and they're immediately like, okay, back to a calmer state, right?
Yes.
And I feel like breathing really can help with that. I was big into yoga before I got married and had kids, which is great because I can relate a lot of those practices back, and it's just so important for adults and kids to learn the importance of breathing. I have a book about that too I'll talk about in a minute, but the first book I chose is called Barbara Throws a Wobbler, and it's by Nadia Shireen. I love this book because it uses the term wobbler, which is fun to say, but it also has a little guide to other bad mood feelings in the back to help kids identify what type of mood it is they're in, which is the first step in self-regulation, like we talked about. So throughout the story, Barbara keeps having little things frustrate her, and she bottles them up, which I've talked to my own daughter about this exact thing, doing this, and how, lo and behold, she's going to end up blowing up eventually. And she's struggling with feeling embarrassed in front of her peers, because obviously once you blow up, you can't really control it and take it back. That's totally relatable for the kids. And she has to learn how to let go of those feelings, and she's got this little wobbler cloud that is following her around. And it's the cloud that reminds her that she created these feelings in the first place, and that means she also has the power to release them as well, which I love, because you think, okay, well, I can't control these feelings that happen to me, but you can more than you think, when you can identify and release them. So I'm sure you're familiar with wobblers. I know you have young kids.
I do, yeah.
Some of your patients maybe. So another book that is out now by the time this podcast airs is I Breathe for Me by Risa Shane. It releases in March, and we're recording this in February. But it's about using breathing techniques as well to calm and ground yourself. It's beautifully illustrated. I can't wait to get my hands on my pre-ordered copy. And we actually have a Blooming Rose book in the works that is about breathing techniques as well. It's called Blooming Rose Chills Out.
So good.
It will probably be the 3rd or 4th book to release. The same kind of things about she gets herself in a sticky situation and how she can use some techniques that she's seen to kind of get her out. So we mentioned it before, but do you teach breath work in your practice in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I love recommending using our breath because it's something that is always with us, right?
Yes.
And so I love fidgets and other different things and self-regulating tools, but our breath is always with us, and it can be something that we regulate in a more subtle way, right? So we can be in the classroom and feel nervous before a test, and we can pause, close our eyes for a second, and just inhale, exhale, right? Catching our breath.
It doesn't have to be a big moment.
Yes, and so I think for teenagers, like walking through the hallway, I have some who that is really overwhelming. And so to be able to remind them, hey, your breath is always with you. Let's try using this tool. And for some of them, it feels funny at first, right? Like, what is this gonna do? But then they try it and it's huge. And I recognize even in myself, as we're doing a breathwork practice in a session, I feel myself calming down too, right? And just settling. And so we use this all the time. And I think it's it can be such a huge asset for us.
Yeah, I didn't think about the privateness. I don't know if that's the word, but being able to do it kind of in a private way, especially for teenagers, are like, oh, that sounds so stupid. I'm not going to try that. And then like 10 seconds later, they're like quietly to themselves, like trying to breathe without letting everybody know. But that's great. All right, so moving right along, with every episode, I'll be choosing at least one of the books we've discussed that pairs well with the correlating SEL resources, a social emotional learning resource for the classroom or home, which is available on our Teachers Pay Teachers page, and it'll also be linked in the show notes along with all of the books we've just talked about. So this week I've created a cloudy day writing resource that prompts students to write or draw, depending on their grade level, some situations where they felt cloudy. So there's an option to share and discuss their situation so they feel related to others as well. I feel like when they get to share that, they're like, oh, he's felt like that too. Okay, that's great. As well as ways to turn that cloud upside down. So if you'd like to check that out, check our show notes, and there will also be a blog post about it, which goes into more detail about that resource. But okay, so before we go, let's take a minute to share our #WinoftheWeek. Because none of us are perfect parents, educators, or counselors and therapists. So let's celebrate what went right. So without giving away any identifying details, of course, what's one situation you've been in lately where you really felt you had a breakthrough moment or a moment of connection with one of your kiddos?
I love this. So last week I actually got to go speak with a group of 5th grade girls. And the big focus was on, hey, as we're growing up, hormones are happening, our bodies are changing, and emotions can get really hard. And so this ended up just being such a cool conversation where girls were opening up about different things they've been feeling or going through. And we talked about, hey, what does this mean? What's kind of underneath that we're feeling, and working through some of these tools that we just talked about, like our breath work or grounding, or what are some coping skills that seem fun for you that don't feel like, okay, when I'm feeling super anxious, I'm not going to want to go do X, Y, and Z, but I would want to step outside for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Or go on a walk. Or I know that coming straight home from school and going right into my homework is too overwhelming for me, right? Like I want to go take a walk with my dog and then eat a good snack. So it just was such a fun conversation, and this is a conversation that I have often with my individual clients, but to be able to get them together in a group and for them to share their own different stories, and just like you mentioned, like with the cloudy day exercise, like being able to hear someone else talk about something that they feel and connecting and relating to that is so huge. Right. And so that was really fun. Definitely a win.
I love that. I love that small group setting too, especially for our middle graders. You know, I've worked in elementary a lot, so I always think on terms of like K through 3rd grade, but just because 5th through 8th terrifies me. But that is really when, you know, you think about how much of a social connection they need at that point, and everything in their world revolves around their social connection. So when they can kind of get in those little groups and see, okay, well, she's felt like this, and, you know, she's felt like this, and, you know, it's just so powerful, I think, when they can know that they're not alone in and whatever
it doesn't have to
feelings.
feel awkward.
It might be awkward at first. So you're gonna be like eye rolls, like whatever, lady. But, you know, once they get into it, and also I think at that age too, like they'll soak up more than you think, even if they have this, you know, this outward appearance of not being interested at all.
Right.
I think they're
picking up.
Yeah, they really are.
The modeling still is happening at that age too. Yeah.
Okay, so this has been so fun, so insightful. Thank you again so much for jumping at the chance to be one of our very first guests on our first season. But before we go, can you just tell us a little bit about the Well Counseling Center and how people can stay in touch and follow along with your amazing space, how they can come visit you guys? Just a really special piece of Katy you've created here.
Thank you. This has been so fun. I've loved our conversation.
Thank you.
So in addition to the work that our team of therapists gets to do with individuals and couples and families, we're from Katy, and so our heart is here, and we just love connecting with our community. So we're really excited. We've started doing more events and just creating a space for individuals to come together and connect and grow and learn. And so to keep up with those events, we've also started a newsletter that goes out monthly to your email list. And if you want to join that, you can find it on our website, thewellcounselingkaty.com. And we're also putting in a bunch of mental health resources and freebies each month with that. And you can also follow along at The Well Counseling Katy on Instagram and Facebook, where we love just updating and connecting and just being a part of this great community.
Awesome. Yes, and I will link to all of that below in the show notes as well. Okay, I think that is it for this week's episode. Thank you again, Carly, for joining us, and thank you guys for listening. I hope you've gained a couple of helpful nuggets for guiding your kids or students through the wobblest of wobblers. Everybody go ahead and say it now. Wobbler.
Wobbler.
I think you feel better after saying it. We'll see you guys next time on the Blooming Books Podcast. Thank you for listening to the Blooming Books Podcast, recorded and produced by Blooming Rose Kids. We've opted to keep our series ad-free, and if you'd like to support our efforts, please consider shopping our own custom-signed Blooming Rose books at bloomingrosekids.com and our academic materials on our Teachers Pay Teachers page. All of the books mentioned in this episode are also available via our affiliate links in the show notes. We so appreciate you being here and hope to see you next time.